Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Burke. I'm so glad you're here. We're going to do some really great things today. Of course, bringing you awesome information, bringing you the answers to the questions you've been having in a long time, and, some of the things that you may not have thought about for a while. That's the whole idea of this podcast. And then bringing you the best minds in the natural products industry. And going to be branching off a little bit, entertainers, professional athletes, the people we want to hear from, the people who have great information to share with us, because let's just face it, that's what it's all about, information and education. Well, today you're going to be very, very excited. My very, very dear friend, Stuart Tomc is here today. He is an industry insight, a legend in the industry, and we're going to be talking about some things today that I think are really important. If you have not had the absolute distinct pleasure to meet or hear Stuart in the past, let me give you a little bit of a background. Stuart is a consultant in the dietary supplement industry. He served as the former global educator and brand ambassador for Nordic Naturals. He was vice president of human nutrition for CV Sciences, makers of Plus CBD, and vice president of North American Herb and Spice, maker of Oreganol P73. Stuart has over 25 years experience in the dietary supplement industry, has helped sell $1 billion in supplements, and has appeared in over 6,000 radio, TV, and podcast interviews. Help me welcome my guest. Hello, Stuart.
Hey, Dr. Jeff. It's so good to see you, my friend.
How's everything going in your world?
I never had a bad day in my life.
I love it. I love it. It's so great. You and I have done so many radio shows together, and the only time we ever get to really see each other is at an event or a show or something. And now we get to have a show together and see each other. It's kind of cool.
It's such a pleasure. Yeah, it's been a distinct honor to be a guest on your show for many, many years. And you've helped educate so many people. So I just want to congratulate you on launching your own show. It's long overdue, and you're one of the industry insiders yourself. So it's really an honor to be with you.
Well, thank you so much. So before we get started, tell me what's new in your world. What's happening? What's new? What are you up to these days? Everybody always wants to know.
Well, I'm back in the omega-3 space, and I want to talk just about the science and just about the new discoveries in omega-3, rather than really talking about the company itself. So it's an organization that's based in Scandinavia, and their entire philosophy is to start testing and stop guessing. Start testing and stop guessing. Now, Jeff, you remember, because we go way back, that I used to hand out these omega-3 blood spot tests.
I remember those,
whether I spoke at Expo West or Expo East or down in Soho. So I'm working with an organization that their entire philosophy is evidence-based, personalized nutrition, where you actually do a little finger prick at the tip of your finger. You put some blood on a piece of paper. You send it in. No vein puncture. You don't need an appointment with a doctor. And you can determine your omega-3 6 balance, your omega-3 index score. They also measure the other fats, because, as you know, my favorite story is the big fat story. And so we measure omega-9, all of the omega-6s, even saturated fat as well. So it's been really an honor for me to jump back into evidence-based nutrition after spending almost a decade with CBD, which was very exciting. And then even going back for a little stint to Nordic Naturals. I'm so lucky to work with a company that their entire philosophy is start testing, stop guessing. Like, how do you know if the omega-3 that you're taking is working? How do you know it's actually getting into your cells, right? Because the tissue is the issue. And we need to know which factors are the actors. So that's one of the reasons I was so excited to come back on your show. And I sent you some supporting material, which I hope can end up in the show notes. Is that okay?
Yes.
Jeff? Okay, so one of the papers that I sent you just to set the stage, if you remember, two of the most distinguished experts in omega-3, Colonel Dr. Michael Lewis, West Point grad, Army Ranger, MD, MPH, MBA. See what happens when you join the Army young? And he has other alphabet soup after his name. I know you've met Mike before,
Yes,
as he affectionately likes to be called. But he and his colleague, Captain Joseph Hibbelin, who was with the National Institutes of Health, the Division of Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism, the preeminent expert on omega-3 and psychiatric issues, while Colonel Lewis was the preeminent expert on omega-3 and traumatic brain injury. And it's been a long time, so I'm sure the audience doesn't remember that back in 2012, these two distinguished public health officials published a paper that was very shocking. They looked at military suicide. Have you had a chance to review the paper that I sent you on that subject?
Yeah, it was heartbreaking.
Do you remember when we first talked about that in 2012?
I do.
So I know it sounds like a kind of a morose way to start a uplifting conversation, but I think it really sets the stage as to how big of a public health issue this is. Because when I say there's 6.9 billion people in the world deficient in omega-3, I've often had people say to me, well, that's a big number, but what does that mean to me? And that's the whole nature of us as educators, is to bring this actionable information to the public. And so what it really means is that if you don't have the right balance in your tissues, which is the issue, that it sets the stage for your body not being able to resolve inflammation, simply put. In any case, this seminal paper, which we'll put in the show notes, they actually tested the blood of soldiers after they had committed suicide. And Jeff, do you remember what the omega-6/3 ratio was? Do you remember that number of the soldiers that committed suicide?
I don't.
Okay, it was 25 to 1.
That's right. I was thinking a quarter to 1, 25 to 1.
Right, which means that they had 25 parts omega-6 to 1 part omega-3.
And of course, omega-6 being inflammatory.
And that's why I wanted to start with this. We want to have a ratio that's closer to 3 to 1, maybe even 1 to 1. But what you said was very important, because the omega-6s that are ubiquitous in our diet, that come from soybean, safflower, sunflower, cottonseed oil, and even for those of us health enthusiasts, you get a lot of omega-6 from seeds and nuts, nut butters, things like avocado. But I want to be very precise in my language here, because I think it's easy to say omega-6s are pro-inflammatory. What my mentor, William E. Lands, you remember Dr. Lands, right?
Of course, yes.
Fish, Omega-3, and Human Health, for those of you taking notes, one of the most important books on the subject. He corrected me lovingly all of the time when I would say things that were oversimplified. And if you remember what he said that omega-6s produce the largely pro-inflammatory signals, where omega-3s produce the largely anti-inflammatory signals, which is why you want to balance between omega-6 and omega-3 in the tissue, which is the issue. Now, the reason I was so excited to come back and talk to you about this is, you remember for years in the industry, people were arguing about which source of fish is the best, right? Is salmon better than cod, better than anchovy? And then we were arguing about the delivery system, right? Is this form of fish oil better than this form of fish oil? Is krill better? And then, of course, our good friends in the plant omega-3 world, who we both know, they would argue that the plant source of omega-3 or the algae is better. What the science that Colonel Lewis and Captain Joe Hibbelin discovered was that it's really the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 in the tissue, which is, again, the issue. And if you're not testing, you're guessing. So that's why I was so excited to get back into the omega-3 space with a company that's entire focus is start testing and stop guessing. In any case, both of these fine, distinguished individuals are now, I get to work with. I get to work directly with Dr.
That's
Michael
wonderful.
Lewis and Dr. Joe Hibbelin on what we believe is the biggest public health initiative of our lifetime. So it's like having the leaders in omega-3, the thought leaders of omega-3, and I come from the business side, taking the same message that we shared with retailers for years, educating Whole Foods, GNC, Vitamin Shop, all the independent shows. Jeff, how many times was I on your show that was connected to the store in Las Vegas? How many times do you think I was a guest on your show?
I can't even keep track. There was so many different times. It was wonderful. It was good every time. It was a lot.
But
And I
my
loved
point
it.
was that even at the store, right, was correct me if I'm wrong, was Stay Healthy,
Mm-hmm.
right, in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
Even though we were able to compete against the other fish oil brands with this evidence-based message, how often did the folks in the health food store, and let's not just pick on that one store, which I love so much, but just in general, can you imagine how few retailers took the message that they learned at the health shows and then educated their customers? For example, I gave away thousands of those blood spot tests.
Mm-hmm.
The man that did the blood spot testing said, Stuart, you've had more people take the test than Johnson & Johnson and the U.S. Army. My question was, did the stores educate the customers? Do you see where I'm going with this?
I do.
And that's what my new mission is. And these distinguished individuals, and there are other doctors that are on the team that I'm working with as well, a famous biochemist, Stephen Chernisky, Professor Paul Clayton from Edinburgh, medical pharmacologist, another colleague of yours, Dr. Michael Garko. Remember him from Let's Talk Nutrition, nationally syndicated, streamed worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
And then even Stephen Schmitz, who I don't think you know, MD, MPH, who runs Supplement Safety Solutions.
Well,
These are just a handful of the medical professionals that are joining forces together with some of the top experts in network marketing. So they're taking the skill of bringing the message directly to the human, belly to belly, as they like to call it, with the top experts in omega-3 that we have a combined 200 plus years or more worth of experience to help people realize that what matters with omega-3 is that omega-3 6 balance score. So the reason I wanted to start with the seminal paper is these two distinguished public health officials found that the soldiers that committed suicide had a 25-to-1 ratio, meaning they had more of the largely pro-inflammatory omega-6, and they were deficient in omega-3. And so that's what I've been up to lately, taking the message that you and I have crafted for years, and instead of speaking to ourselves, instead of speaking to the industry, I'm now embarking on a mission to share this with the entire world.
you know, and I'm very excited about this for you because you'll be a great deliverer of message. To my point, it's funny when we're talking about the spot test. I remember a lady that I knew that took the test that you had sent out the spot test, and she was always hands down that her levels had to be above and beyond perfect and all this kind of stuff. And when she got it back, she found out that she was amazingly out of balance and extremely low in omega-3s. And it was one of the most, it was just, she was just completely taken back. And she said, I guess I've been guessing, to your point, and thinking that I was doing this. So a couple years later, she adjusted everything and did another test later down the road. She was in really good order. So the same conversation ensued when she was talking about vitamin D. She says, I know my vitamin D levels are perfect. I've been doing this for a while. And her new doctor said, let's test your vitamin D. And she found out that she was once again very, very low in her vitamin D. So to your point, I think a lot of times we assume. I think sometimes we think if we open the bottle and we swallow the pill, the tablet, the liquid, whatever, and we're doing it, that we're automatically getting the most out of it. But we're fighting everything from, age to poor assimilation to poor digestion to not good delivery to severely low levels to start with. So there's a lot of factors that go into this. And I think this might really take it to the next step of clarity. Does that make sense?
I totally agree, because we are at the age of personalized nutrition. Most of us have taken 23andMe. We hear the conversation about the SNPs, but we don't always know what that translates into. Knowing that the epigenetic factors, the factors above the genes, the dance between nature and nurture. So I wanted to work with a company that had their eye on the prize 6.9 billion people deficient in omega-3. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And correcting the omega-3 deficiency and balancing your lipids may be the simplest, most profound thing we can possibly do for human health. It's the number that you don't know that you will know. Now, I'm going to just riff for a minute here. This is Stuart's opinion.
Please do.
I predict that your omega-3/6 balance score will show up on your standard blood panel in less than 5 years. This is my prediction. And the reason I'm saying that is, like you being a lifer in the industry, I started in 1990 at Sherwin's Health Food Store and then built North American Herb and Spice, as you mentioned, and then plus CBD and Nordic Naturals before that. I remember when people told us that we were a little silly for taking vitamin D. Remember that?
I sure do. To your point, real quick, I was at a store in West Hollywood, the Hollywood area where I first started. It was like 1981, 82, way back then. And they had vitamin D on the bottom shelf. And I said, why do you have vitamin D on the bottom shelf? And she goes, well, we really don't sell it, but we carry it. And I said, well, why don't you sell it? She goes, because we're not really allowed to say much about it, because if you're taking a multiple, you can't take extra D because it's toxic. Did you know? And I mean, I was 20 years old and I was just like, it's so crazy. And here we are years later, and now vitamin D is part of a blood panel. So I think you are right on with this. I really do.
No, thank you. Because I remember when it happened, I was overdosing on vitamin D. I was taking 50,000 IUs of D3 every day for like 6 or 7 years. And I got a kidney stone. I was guessing. I wasn't testing. It's such a funny story. I went to the emergency room. Well, first I stopped at my chiropractor. You'll love this. I'm green and I'm driving myself. I walk in there and Dr. Estelle and Dr. Steve look at me and they say, what are you doing here? I said, I think I have a kidney stone. And they said, why are you here at the chiropractor's office? You should be at the emergency room. And I said, I want to get an adjustment first so I can go in and fight for myself. And this was great. Dr. Steve looked at me and goes, you believe in this shit way more than I do, meaning chiropractic, which was great. I go in there. My wife's there. My son, he was little at the time, and they got the schmuck on me. They always put the IV bag. They make it cold. Like they should warm that up, right? And
You
shake
think.
it, right?
You think.
I've got the little schmuck on. And I'll never forget, the doctors came in. They're like this. Young man, we need to talk to you. Your vitamin D levels are 785. They were so high. It was like an intervention. Like you better stop taking the vitamin D, kid. And I learned a huge lesson there that, like most people, I fell prey to the idea that if a little bit is good, more is better.
I've been there.
So the idea of how much time and money and effort I wasted on all of these dietary supplements because I was guessing instead of testing. The company I'm working with now also has an at-home vitamin D test. They have an at-home A1C, long-term blood sugar test. And they're working on other tests, like one for leaky gut and one for leaky brain. And the reason I like this more than the DNA testing that looks at your SNPs and then tells you what supplements to take is just because you have certain alleles, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get the same conditions. And I think the FDA was concerned, rightly so, when 23andMe came out, when they were telling people you have these SNPs, it means you're going to get these diseases. And I think the other thing that's important is that in nutrition, which is what we do, we're not doctors like medical doctors. We have medical doctors that are working with me now, but the role of nutrition is to keep healthy people healthy and to make healthy people healthier. And there's not one number that is more important than understanding your omega-3/6 balance. So let's go from the 25-1 to 1-1, right? In the military suicide paper, that was over 10 years ago. And let's move up until today. Have you seen the reports circling around on mainstream media about the data out of the United Kingdom called the UK Biobank?
Yes.
You've been following the story?
Yes.
They're 500,000 people. I mean, it's such an incredibly delicious sample size of people. And another doctor that I'm very close with, Dr. Carrie Marshall, you remember her, ND, and she is the third author on one of these seminal papers that's actually looking at the omega-3 6 ratio and the omega-3 index, the measurement of omega-3 in this giant sample set. And what they're finding is people that are profoundly deficient in omega-3, that it correlates to a 40% increase in all causes of mortality. This is now moving it into the realm of a very important public health initiative, a preventative health to keep people healthy. Because I think that's the thing that people in our industry, Jeff, and maybe not those of us that work in it, but the customers failed to remember the Dietary Supplement Health Education Act that we lived through. And I'll just simply remind anyone who's not familiar with this lingo, we all in the supplement business made a deal that our supplements weren't going to treat, cure, prevent, ameliorate any disease or any disease symptom. Otherwise, they would be considered drugs.
True.
And our job was to help educate people that nutrition, when you are deficient in certain things, bad things can happen. So if we just deal with the structure function, as we call it, I've recently learned something very, very horrible, very bad happens for people that are low in omega-3. And I haven't had a chance to talk to you about this yet. I was going to just test it out live on your podcast.
Bring it.
Okay, you're familiar with red blood cell width distribution, right?
Yes.
Okay, so for the average person, if you've got some red blood cells that are small and some that are real big, they're not all uniform. That's real bad. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now the lipids, the fats that we eat, any fats that we eat, make up the cell membrane, the brain of the cell. We're made of 37 trillion cells, and we make, some people say, 800 billion new cells a day. It takes 120 days for these red blood cells to turn over. So as your diet changes, as your fat intake changes, so do your red blood cells. Mm-hmm. Well, they've recently found out, now we're going here now into the land of medical hypotheses here, that when you correct your omega-3 deficiency and balance your omega-6-3 ratio, that your red blood cells become more flexible. Because if you don't have enough omega-3, they're kind of stiff, because the saturated fats are like popsicle sticks, mm-hmm. and the omega-3 EPA and DHA are like Slinkies. Mm-hmm. And you need a balance of popsicle sticks and Slinkies, right, for the red blood cell to operate properly. Well, they found out recently that if you're deficient in omega-3, that red blood cell might not be able to get as small as it needs to get, half of its size, be flexible enough to get into your capillaries. So one of the great experts in the field, Dr. William Harris, we need to give Bill Harris always a nod in the omega-3 world. He's just such an icon. True. Has said, maybe we don't fully understand yet how omega-3s work, that they're so pluripotent, which means they have multiple mechanisms of action, maybe above and beyond the anti-inflammatory signals, maybe above and beyond what we call the specialized pro-resolution mediators, meaning we need inflammation to turn on, but we need a coordinated effort to turn it off. What if, he says, omega-3 makes the red blood cell more flexible, helping you to bring oxygen and gases more effectively through your body? Now, I had this aha moment. So I was on the phone with Colonel Dr. Michael Lewis. I'm spouting off, as I always do. And he said, time out. Go to the literature. Go to PubMed, PubMed.gov, PubMed.gov. Type in omega-3 and VO2 max. So VO2 max is the ultimate measurement of longevity. It is the most important measurement of all, your oxygen handling. And lo and behold, I look at my eyes, they've done a lot of work already with cyclists, with athletes, that when you get more omega-3s in your tissue, which is the issue, the red blood cells now are more flexible, bringing oxygen through the body. They made a direct correlation between correcting the omega-3 deficiency and increasing VO2 max. So if you're lifting weights, and I am, and I know a lot of people are, and sitting in the sauna and doing your deep breathing, right? I'm a big Wim Hof fan. If you're doing all of these things to help your body get proper oxygen as it needs to, if you're deficient in omega-3, and I want to tell you about my scores here in a moment because they were embarrassing. If you're deficient in omega-3, you're missing the boat. So we can now add to the list of, well, what is this going to do for me? Omega-3s are going to enhance cell-to-cell communication. What happens if you lose communication in your relationship? It breaks down.
Got it. Out of here.
I've worked for a bunch
Over.
of big companies. What if you lose communication in the company? Everything breaks down. Without
right.
omega-3, cell-to-cell communication breaks down. Number two, if you don't have enough omega-3, all the nutrients that you're taking, everything, they do not as effectively get into the cell. So by not taking omega-3, now you're wasting your time and money with all this nutritional modification. And then also, if you don't have enough omega-3 in the cells, you can't get waste products out. So think about this for a moment. Correcting your omega-3/6 imbalance can help increase cell-to-cell communication of our 37 trillion cells, gets the nutrients in more effectively, gets the waste products out, and now makes the cells more flexible to carry oxygen and gases more effectively through your whole body. So, Jeff, I can't point to one thing that I think is more of a modifiable risk factor, and I'll tell you why. We're never going to get people to change their diet. I've given up.
I know.
I don't know about you.
You
can't tell anybody what
over
to eat.
4 decades. I'm still a preaching.
It's not going to happen. So here's the thing. If you can lower the risk of death 40% by correcting the omega-3 deficiency, and it's correlated, obviously, right?
Sure.
That means getting your omega-6s and 3s in balance are as important, listen to this, as quitting smoking, quitting drinking, lifting weights, or getting the asbestos out of your house. So if I was to rank of all the modifiable risk factors, it's omega-3 and correcting the omega-3/6 balance. And so that was some of the stuff. Now, there's more. I found out that not all fish oils are the same. I have been puzzled by something, Jeff. And before I launch into this diatribe, I just want to ask you what your thoughts are. Why does the American Heart Association Scientific Advisory Board say to eat fish twice a week? Cold water oily fish, I'm adding that. They just say fish, but let's face it, the cold water oily fish are where the omega-3s are. True. Eat fish twice a week, but they're not recommending omega-3 supplements. They're only recommending omega-3 pharmaceutical drugs. What do you think the difference is between eating fish and refined fish oil? Because I learned something that's going to blow your mind. What do you think the difference is between fish oil and eating fish? What says Dr. Jeff?
Well, I've been bewildered about this, and you and I have come up on this conversation before. And of course, I want to do as much as I can possibly do and get people to do through dietary notions. If I can get people, and you've been around the world, you've been in places in the world where people, their diet, I remember you told me before, you were at a place where it wasn't when you had fish, it was what kind of fish you were having at that meal during the same day, because fish was just a huge part of their culture was amazing. But the funny thing is, that's not the norm. I think, I know I'm going to be wrong with this. I feel that if they're going to make a recommendation in their mind, it has to be a pharmaceutical because it stays within the pharmaceutical realm. And maybe in their mind, are they thinking that people will adapt to eating fish twice a week rather than taking a supplement? I don't know where they're coming from. It makes no sense to me, but I have new cardiologists that I deal with now that are now writing handwritten prescriptions, sending people to health food stores for quality omega-3 fish oils that they weren't doing in the past. So I need to hear this.
Okay, so there is a disconnect. So let's just look at Japan for a moment.
Please.
The culture that eats 150 pounds on average, less now, 150 pounds of seafood per person per year. This was many years ago. And they correlated that to the lowest rates of postpartum depression, homicide, and suicide mortality rates. So there's something about eating fish, which is different than refined fish oil. And if you go to the medical literature and you look up the Cochrane reviews, you find out that there's this conflicting data. Some of the studies show that fish oil capsules are helpful. Others suggest maybe not.
Yep.
There's been this new warning that fish oils in high amounts may cause atrial fibrillation, which you never see with eating fish. And My friends in the omega-3 space, we've been scratching our heads for years trying to figure out what's the difference between fish and purified fish oil. And I've recently come upon some information that I think explains it.
I'm open. Let's go.
Check this out. So the little tiny fish that we use to make fish oil are pretty much all caught in the same place off the coast of Peru. And it's not because anyone's exploiting the Peruvians. There's this thing called the Humboldt Current, which wells up plankton from the bottom of the ocean. And they're more pelagic little anchovies. We call them anchoveta in Peru. And that's where the bulk of all refined fish oil comes from. So I used to love the joke when I was at Nordic Naturals and people would say, this fish oil is better than this fish oil because this one comes from here and this one comes from there. I used to say, yeah, they all come from the same place, the ocean. And they thought that was a snarky answer. But what we found is the little tiny fish eat plankton that eat algae. So the algae is the original source for the EPA and DHA. Now, in the algae are fluorotannins, and they're stuck right to the algae. And the fluorotannins contain polyphenols, powerful antioxidants. They do two things. They protect the delicate EPA and DHA because they have a lot of double bonds with oxygen. I mean, it's 20, 22 carbons long. And so without the polyphenols connected to the fatty acids, the algae would just blow up. So the fish eat the algae. The algae helps to bring, this is important, the omega-3 effectively into the tissue, which is the issue. When you make purified fish oil, and I've helped to sell hundreds of millions of dollars worth of purified fish oil, the only way to remove PCBs, mercury, dioxins, fire retardants, forever chemicals, is to do something called molecular distillation, where you distill based on molecular weight. You got to get out all the bad stuff so you can get your EPA and DHA. What I didn't know until about a month ago was that when you do that, you also strip away the polyphenols. This was an aha moment I had that just blew my mind. And I listened to this guy, Ole Idi. He's a 72-year-old Norwegian. And he tells this great story about how they had this unrefined fish oil next to the refined fish oil. He says, and the unrefined fish oil tasted like hell. It was great delivery, right? But it worked. It had more secondary bioavailability. So instead of just getting into your blood, it actually got into the tissue, which is the issue, into the cell membrane. I'll never forget being at the International Society of the Study of Fatty Acids and Lipids. And if my memory serves me right, it was Robert Gibson, Dr. Gibson, who won a Lifetime Achievement Award. I'm pretty sure that was him. I've relived the story many times. It might be another Australian researcher, but I think that's who it was. And you always work the booth. And you know me, I'm super friendly with all the scientists. I'm a science groupie, right? And he looks at me. I'm telling him about how fresh our fish oil is, how low the oxidation level is. He puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, "You seem like a nice young man. I'm going to help you out here." He said, "I did some of the original research on tuna oil before we had nitrogen blankets to push out all the oxygen, all this fancy molecular distillation." And he said, and it was red, it would oxidize because of that. He said, it just tasted horrible. And it worked like a charm. Just like your grandmother's cod liver oil.
Ugh, I remember.
It wasn't highly refined back in the day. So what we've learned is, while you're trying to remove the PCBs, the mercury, and the dioxins, and you're stripping it down to just the fatty acids, unbeknownst to ourselves, we're removing the cofactors that are chaperones that help to bring the fatty acid into that cell membrane, which is where you want it because you're made of 37 trillion cells. You want to get the right EPA and DHA into the cell membrane so the red blood cells are flexible enough to bring the oxygen and gases through the body. I'm having this aha moment. And then I remember the krill oil thing. I was part of fighting that. Mm-hmm. We were mad. We brought in the National Advertising Division Challenge of the Council for Responsible Nutrition and the Better Business Bureau. How dare you say all you need is one little pill? I'm looking at the milligram amount. I'm thinking it's impossible. Well, krill had astaxanthin in it.
Yeah.
What I've realized now is that the very, very best fish oils, this is now my opinion, are a mixture of the highest quality fish oil with the highest quality olive oil. Because olive oil contains polyphenols that are very similar, structurally similar to the polyphenols in algae. And you want to look for a product that has omega-3, EPA, DPA, DHA on the bottle, omega-7, omega-9 from the olive oil, but you want to look for the polyphenols. And you saw the article going around the last couple of days about olive oil, which I included. I'm going to include that in the show notes with the things I sent you. This just went viral, looking at 92,000 people plus over 28 years eating 7 grams of olive oil a day correlated to a 28% reduction in dementia death. And it's not the olive oil itself, it's the polyphenols, the thyrosol, the hydroxythyrosol. I start looking up these polyphenols in olive oil that I never studied, and they're incredible. Not only do they help get the fatty acids into the tissue, which is the issue, by themselves, they're using them in stroke models. Colonel Lewis looked at this and said, wow, maybe this is why purified fish oil isn't delivering on the promise. Maybe this is the rate limiting factor that's missing. There are papers out there that show that the polyphenols in the olive oil help to break up microcalcification in your arteries. I mean, you remember Dr. Maroon from the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? Author of Fish Oil, the natural anti-inflammatory. You remember him. He's the neurosurgeon for the Pittsburgh Steelers and Heidel scholar. He's written 500 peer-reviewed papers. He's essentially my dad, right? He's the dad I never had. And I called him up and I said, look at this. Look at this breakthrough of these polyphenols in olive oil and mixing them with the fish oil so that the finished product is like liquid oily fish. And I said, wait a minute. If you add all the polyphenols and the olive oil and the omega-3, it's like a Mediterranean diet in a bottle. And what I found was this organization that I'm working with has tested 1.3 million people with their omega-6/3 balance score. And listen to what I've learned from one of their scientists. Jeff, they're finding people that have a high omega-3 index because they were eating a lot of fish oil. But it might not necessarily be getting into the cells. And they start taking this oil that's the combination of olive oil and fish oil and polyphenols, and they say, wow, that shoulder, my skin, my energy levels. So I think we've cracked the code. The reason that the American Heart Association scientific advisory is to eat cold water oily fish is when you eat fish, they're more than EPA and DHA. And I used to think it was selenium or vitamin D or the plasminogens. Now I know. It's the fluorotannins, the polyphenols that stick to the fatty acids, bring them through the trophic levels of the fish so that when you eat this oil, it gets into the cells like you want it to. And more importantly, it doesn't just increase the omega-3 index. No, that's only one marker. It balances the omega-3/6 ratio, going back to the soldiers. What if they knew this? What if they knew that a 25-to-1 ratio, which is where the average American is a warning light? It's like your engine light. Bah, bah, bah. And what if you knew that all you had to do is start testing and stop guessing? And then take the oil that's made of the fish oil and the olive oil with the polyphenols, wait 120 days and test again and go from out of balance into balance. So I did this test. You remember my nickname in the industry? Remember they called me Omega Man?
They still do.
But I was a little embarrassed by that because you don't make up your own nickname. Someone else did it for me. Well, I took my test and I'm recently following Dr. Greger, nutritionfacts.org. I love him. I was a vegan for a long time when I worked at Sherwin's Health Food Store with Neil Levin, a mutual friend of ours, now at Now Foods, who was a guest on your show. Did I ever tell you Neil was my boss at Sherman's Health Food Store?
I did not.
Neil was my boss. So that's what I love about the industry, right? You can fact check who we are. You don't have to like look it up. I just come to one of our shows and ask everybody. Who's Dr. Jeff? Who's Stu Ball, right? Well, I was a vegan back then. I was following Karen Calabrese in Chicago, and she was a disciple of Victoris.
Yep.
Do you remember that book, Survival into the 21st Century?
I do.
Right. So I'm going back to this. I'm eating tons of tofu, tons of tempeh, big piles of kale, right? Michael Pollan, what did he say? Eat less, more plants, right? Eat less calories, eat more plants. And I'm at the gym. I'm working out all the time. I'm in the sauna an hour a day. I'm feeling pretty good. I did my omega-3 score. Oh, my goodness. I was 13-1. 13 parts omega-6, 1 part omega-3. It wasn't 25-1 like the average.
Still.
But I want to be 3-1 or 2-1. My omega-3 index was 4. You want to go from 4 to 9. And that correlates in the greatest risk reduction. So I had a dose of my own medicine. I was eating flax meal all the time. These muffins that I eat that are loaded with plant-based omega-3 flax meal. I'm eating all the greens I possibly can. And I thought, I'm over this omega-3 fish oil thing. Maybe it's blown up because I saw the literature saying maybe it's not delivering on the promise. I stopped eating sardines every day. Remember I ate sardines every day?
I remember. Well, I tried it with you. I went 2 days. I couldn't do it anymore.
When I worked at Nordic Naturals, I would show people my incredible omega-3 scores. And I said, I eat sardines every day. And they're like, you don't take Nordic Naturals, remember? I said, no, I don't even take the product, man. Because I eat enough fish. I tested myself. My score was miserable. And then I started testing some of my other friends that joined the team I'm working with, some brokers. And they came in, they tested, and they were worse than me. So anyway, I'll wrap it up after this. I sent my results to some of these scientists and doctors I'm friends with, and they said, oh, what happened to Omega Man? Did you stop taking your omega-3? So the reason I'm telling the story is that even if you think you're healthy, and remember, we were faced with this all the time. I would say, here's your omega-3 blood spot test. I love to hear about it from young, invincible, beautiful people. A lot of young people worked in health food stores back in the day, right?
Yep.
I have 2% body fat. I'm a yoga instructor. I look like a model. I juice all the time. My omega-3 scores are going to be great. Well, we tested them, and they were miserable. I had people walking up to me saying, look, I'm a vegan. But shh, don't tell anybody. I'm going to take this cod liver oil. Now we have algae omega. So we have, our company, we have an algae with olive oil and polyphenol. So there's options now. So the big takeaway that I wanted to share with the audience is the future of omega-3 is simple. Test, take the fish oil, olive oil, and polyphenols, test again. Go from out of balance into balance. You don't need to get under the hood. There are 25,000 papers on omega-3. I'm not bragging here. I've read most of them. It's unnecessary. You don't need to know. I just am obsessed with the details that you don't need that. What you need to know is your number. I remember one time in Florida, I think you were there at one of my talks when I spoke with Colonel Michael Lewis, Dr. Michael Lewis.
I was there.
We gave out the blood test, and I said, next year, I'm going to come here and have little paddles like at an auction and markers. And I want you to write your number down. You have 1 year. I'm going to give you the test. Nordics is going to give you the test for free. Take the test. The next year, I said, okay, we're ready now. I want everybody to write down. Everyone took their test, right? There were like 4 hands that went up, Jeff. People would take the test and put it in their drawer.
Oh, yeah.
And take the fish oil and not take the test. So that's what I wanted to share today, that we've covered 2 new things, 2 new discoveries. Well, omega-3 isn't new. The blood test isn't new.
No.
The system that I'm working with these experts is new because we have to educate one person at a time, get them to take the test, take the oil that again is fish oil, olive oil with the right polyphenols and vitamin D together, wait 120 days and test again. If we can do that, if mental health disorders were predicted to outrank cancer by the year 2020, did it happen? Yes, it did. Our brains are on fire. The brain is a supercomputer made out of fat. So this message that I'm delivering today is the most important mission of my entire life. And Jeff, I just want to thank you for so many years of being my colleague, being my friend, being my brother, like off camera. Like we text each other, music all the time, and fun stuff that you really allowed me to spit this all out. This is a little bit of a diatribe, but thank you for letting me get it all out, because it's hard to say this in an elevator pitch.
Yeah,
and
very
thank
true.
you so much for letting me say it all on your show.
Oh, my pleasure. And, and I want to thank you for being here. Of course, we'll be doing many, many more of these now that I have this amazing platform. But before we leave everybody with a thought for the day. It could be on anything that is in your heart that you want to share, but your thought for the day for the people tuning in.
Well, my thought for the day is that the service is the rent that we pay for our time on earth. And that my personal mission is to ease the suffering of others. And if there are 6.9 billion people on the planet that are deficient in omega-3, 95% of people are deficient in omega-3. However, 95% of the people that take the test, that take the balanced oil, that then test again, get back into balance. Be of service. Share this message with everybody that you love. Start with your friends and family, but shout it from the rooftops. Service is the rent that we pay for our time on earth. And Jeff, I love you so much. I'm so proud of you. Your show is going to be such an enormous success.
Thank you.
And I'll look back on being one of the early guests on your show. Thank you so much, my brother.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. Remember the platform, Honest Health with Jeffrey Burke. You can go to the podcast on Spotify. You can actually watch us side-by-side interview on the YouTube channel, same name, Honest Health with Jeffrey Burke. New platform for me. If there's buttons to push, like subscribe, say hello, thank you, all that stuff, press them all and bring all your friends along with you. So many other amazing shows coming your way. Thank you for tuning in today. Have a great day and God bless.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.